Move that little black.
Okay. The box is gone. Okay, everybody. Hello. This is Tikva from Homeopathy for Humanity. And we are continuing with Bönninghausen's characteristic value of symptoms today. This is part 3, where we are number 5, poor. Why? And everybody sees the screen, right, guys?
Yep.
Okay, so we had previously, this is a hexameter. This was once a religious verse. Quis, quid, ubi, bibus auxilius, cur, modo, quando. Used to be a religious verse that was used by the Catholic Church, and Bönninghausen converted it to memory of case taking in order to remind us what we're doing when we are seeing people in order to help them. So we are now on cur. Why? Why? The cause of the disease plays a prominent role in pathological books, and justly. But a large part of this amounts only to guesses and attempts at explanation, which mostly have a very subordinate value or none at all in the proper therapy of the disease, and which are too remote for our doctrine, which is directed merely to the practical. The causes of disease are most generally, and indeed very properly, divided into external and internal. The internal causes properly refer only to the general natural disposition, which in some cases amounts to a peculiar supersensitivity, idiosyncrasy. The external causes or occasional causes embrace everything which, where there is such an internal disposition to disease, may produce disease. Okay, so that's disease from within the person.
Excuse me, Tikva.
You need to scroll it down?
Yeah, can you continue scrolling as you're reading? I'm not sure you're.
Yeah, it's usually my book because of the vision difference. Okay. The general natural disposition. Okay. So there's the internal reasons for disease and the external reasons for disease. Can we name some internal reasons for disease? Perhaps genetics or something like that.
Would infection, even though it's something external that enters internally, perhaps?
Well, I think that we're going to go to the external cause. Well, let's continue. The general natural disposition, which is also the proximate cause, really belongs to the first question, quis, which respects the individuality of the patient. So that is, who is our patient? Quis means who. It only belongs here insofar as the consequences of a form of disease may have modified the original natural disposition, and thus it deserves mention. So it only belongs as much as it changes the natural disposition of the person. The occasional cause, however, is the matter with which the present question occupies itself and which deserves to be more closely considered. As the natural disposition notified through previous diseases, this either depends on the miasmic chronic nature of those diseases as yet exterminated. You remember how miasm is a disease that remains uncured in the body, among which, in agreement with the teachings of Hahnemann, many homeopaths, even at this day, count spora, syphilis, and psychosis, or it is derived from the remains and after effects of acute diseases, which when they do not belong to the former, as is frequently the case, constitute the numerous classes of medicinal diseases or poisonings. So we've got a few different things here. We've got the natural disposition disease that people are susceptible for. We have diseases caused by pathogenic matter. And then we have the chronic miasmic diseases. And now he talks about the classes of medicinal diseases or poisonings. Not unfrequently, however, we meet with cases where both these momenta have cooperated to undermine the natural health, thus producing a monster of a disease, which is even more deeply inrooted and more difficult to combat. Yes, so that combined chronic disease of spora with the medicinal disease becomes very complicated, according to Bönninghausen. But it's something that we frequently meet with, where people have had various treatments and other things that have changed their health status, which can easily be combined with spora and gives us something that's more complicated to treat. I think that's why a lot of people these days are using dynamized drugs in order to try to alleviate some of that. As to the recognition and treatment of the first mentioned miasmic diseases and their complications, Hahnemann himself, in his masterly work on the chronic diseases, left us with the most complete directions, founded on many years' experience. Okay, so he refers us to Hahnemann's chronic diseases to learn that book so that we know how to proceed. Later experience has also taught us that additional medicines from our medical treasury should be numbered in this category, which have not yet thus treated, have not been thus treated of in this excellent work. Okay, so there are more medicines that can be added. I'm only sorry that Hahnemann has not been able to fulfill the promise which he gave me in writing, that he would treat as thoroughly and completely the images of syphilis and psychosis with his accustomed mastership as he had done in the above mentioned work. With respect to latent and reawakened spora. Okay. Whether we may believe in what many somewhat derisively call Hahnemann's spora theory, or reject the same, the attentive practitioner must frequently have found cases where even the remedy chosen with perfect correctness in some acute disease did not unfold its proper and decided effect before one of the so much criticized antisporics, frequently sulfur, had first been used when spora had been involved, or an antisyphilitic or antipsychotic when syphilis or psychosis had been present before and had remained uncured. Remember how we talk in the chronic diseases about how the miasm is simply an uncured disease that lingers in the body. And here he says something interesting about how often we need to give sulfur before the treatment will work properly. Has anybody ever tried that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, but this is something that he's saying that sometimes needs to be done. He says frequently. But when we go to his cases, it doesn't look like it's altogether that frequent, but he does use a lot of antisporic remedies, often back to back, within a short time period. Okay, so remember, we have, let's say somebody has awakened spora with their acute disease, he's suggesting give sulfur first, or another antisporic, and then treat the acute, and then it'll work better. Okay. It must, however, be confessed to be one of the most difficult tasks of the physician to always make the most suitable choice among the antisporic remedies, as most of them have almost the same symptoms, and very few truly characteristic symptoms are found with the different remedies. The more necessary is it for the homeopath to study with continuous industry these lists of symptoms and to compare them with each other in order that he may pick up the scattered grains of gold for his use. Okay, now that is interesting. So he said that there's a lot of similarities between the various antisporics and that we need to study them carefully and see where the characteristics lie in each one. Poisonings and medicinal diseases, he gives a study guide in the beginning of the therapeutic pocketbook about how to go about studying the symptoms. Pick the rubric, then go back to the remedies in the rubric, and then pick out where the rubric came from the proving data. He says that's a technique that will etch it into your mind permanently. Poisonings and medicinal diseases are in one line, and it makes no difference by whose hand anyone has been deprived of his health by means of a substance injurious to his organism. Among those substances, medicines as well as poisons find their place. Okay, so he's saying here that it doesn't matter if somebody's actually intentionally poisoned somebody or unintentionally, or whether or not it's been a poisoning with medicine, also known as a medicinal disease, because a lot of medicines are very strong and they have a deep effect on the organism. Of course, it is always of the greatest importance to know in every case the medicines or poisons in order that they may be met by the proper well-known antidotes. Well, nowadays we don't have very many well-known antidotes to our medicines or poisons, do we? And that's something some of the newer homeopaths are working on. See which things help remove certain things from the system. And he says it's important to know which medicines people have been taking. So when we sit down with somebody or before we sit down with somebody, it's a good idea to say, can we have a list of medications that you're taking or that you have been taking so that we know if any of the symptoms that are there currently are the result of medications, which is not infrequent. This happens pretty often, where somebody will have a symptom and you'll go and you look it up in the data for the medicine, the what's it called, that package insert, or you go to websites that give the information, and it can definitely be side effects. So side effects from medications are in a different class than person's symptom from their illness and need to be addressed along with it. So you can combine the symptoms of medicinal disease along with the person's disease and find medicines that cover all. Or you can, there's different approaches for this. Okay. The simple poisons may be easily and surely recognized by their effects. It would have required but one case of poisoning occurring before the eyes of a homeopath for him to have recognized the effects of arsenic, which yet remained unknown to all the allopathic physicians in the case of the 30 murders of Tim. How would we say that in Ivana? Justina Time, how would we say that in Bremen? Okay, anyway, some 30 people were murdered with arsenic, and a homeopath would notice at first what had happened there. In the medicinal diseases, thus it is more difficult because seldom or never is one medicine given by itself, but always mixed with others. It cannot, therefore, yield a clear and definite image. And with the modern drugs that people are given, those are just chemical formulations that are intended to cause a specific action in the body. So that takes it to a different level, doesn't it? With these medicinal diseases, therefore, it is necessary, as in the other case, it is desirable, and it facilitates the treatment if we have a reliable account of what has preceded and to be able to look over the prescriptions. So yes, definitely ask people what they are taking and what they have been taking in order to get an idea of what might have gone wrong in a medicinal disease type of way. Like sometimes we'll have women that have been taking contraceptives and then they have a failure to ovulate and stuff like that. And we need to address that as a medicinal problem rather than a personal problem. Since this may be of use even later on as the treatment proceeds, the journals of many homeopaths have a special rubric reserved for this subject. We must consider these symptoms, called anamnestic, as being of special importance in this question. So when we're taking the case history, we want to take note of these things. Although the ordinary consequences of such morbiferous circumstances and events are almost already contained in the lists of symptoms of the medicines proved on healthy people, yet homeopathic practice has long ago shortened and made sure the tedious and troublesome path of such investigations and indicated for most of these cases the remedies which are foremost in their usefulness of such cases. In this example, very much simplified in cases of contusions, sprains, burns, and the like. So when it comes to these kinds of things, we have these pretty much planned out. Like, for a deep burn, causticum. For a lesser burn, it's more likely to use arsenicum. Nowadays, people use hot pepper. In other cases, exampling colds, the matter is already somewhat more complicated. Since the kind of a cold and the part of the body affected offer differences again, point to different remedies. Thus, there is a great difference in this respect as to whether the person had been simply exposed to the cold or whether this took place while the body was in perspiration, or if he at some time got wet through. So also it is well known that different remedies are indicated when internal parts, stomach, abdomen, chest, have been exposed, or merely external parts, head, feet, back, and this must be carefully weighed in every case. All this, as before said, is found among the symptoms in the Materia Medica, but when once it is known that a cold in the head from exposure to cold air after previously being in a heated room or having had the hair cut points to belladonna or sepia. After taking cold in the feet, to brida or silica. And when at the same time there has been a wetting, to certain other remedies, then the attention will first of all be directed to these and only comparisons be made with others which are occasionally indicated when the first are not sufficiently suitable. So we go to the main thing of how the cold started, and then we can select from there which ones are in that rubric, and then we can leave the other ones aside. Finally, we must yet add a word under this question about infectious diseases, about which in pathological manuals we read so much that is contradictory and unreliable, the influence of which teaching is, however, much more far-reaching than is generally supposed. To meet these diseases, which often spread until they become a real calamity, homeopathy has the most sure and approved prophylactics. And these indeed are the very same which have the power of healing those diseases when they have developed. Therefore, when we find in a family a case of infectious typhoid fever, there the same remedy which has been given to the patient in accordance with his symptoms will also be sure to protect those in the house from infection, as it destroys the natural disposition thereto, and it will even in the shortest time restore those with whom there may have already been an apparent beginning of disease. This last fact is the most important, as these first beginnings are usually so poor in symptoms that no certain choice can be found on them, but the known occasional cause fully makes up for what is lacking. Of course, such a cure is not so brilliant as when the patient has been at the verge of the grave, but the gain for him and the consciousness of the physician is his sufficient reward. Okay, so we have here the beginnings of the so-called genus epidemicus in homeopathy, where Bönninghausen explains how in an epidemic we can give the same people in the same house, same remedy that we've given the patient, and that will usually be in the system before the person gets sick. So you can treat the whole family at the same time. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? Because that's an interesting thing. So for example, if people get chicken pox in a family, you can oftentimes pulsatilla will ward off chicken pox. But at the same time, whether or not we would want to treat it would be dependent on things like, who's in the house, how old are the children, are any of them weak and can't handle being sick. Because just because there is a disease doesn't mean that we necessarily need to treat the disease. And that's another thing to remember. Not everything needs to be treated because everybody does have a vital force. Everybody does have an immune system.
How do we decide?
How do we decide?
Yes.
Well, it depends on things like severity and stuff like that. If you've got a whole bunch of little kids who are coming down with the chicken pox all in one home, as long as, all those children are normatively healthy, it's okay to just let them get chicken pox. You don't necessarily need to prevent it. And if anything goes wrong, you can treat it if necessary. And because most children are fine with the chicken pox, right? Yes, no, maybe your experience with chicken pox.
When we
So
were
I'm
a
finding.
kid, when we were kids, it was a party. Everybody got chicken pox.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, so most children are fine with chicken pox. I remember, the chicken pox, people are trying to prevent it with a vaccine now, and that vaccine was invented. Why? Anybody know why?
The real reason? No.
Yeah, the real reason why. Yeah, the real reason why they developed a chickenpox vaccine was in order to save women from having to stay home with sick children for weeks on end, and their impact on the workforce.
Oh, yes, you did write that in the group once. Yes.
Yeah. Because most children, almost all children, they just get a little bit sick. They'll be a little bit fetchy, but they get through it just fine. So we don't necessarily need to treat it. I think that when my kids had chickenpox, I don't remember treating it. I just remember just letting them be sick and just taking care of them.
We weren't treated as
No,
kids,
no, we weren't.
never. Like, just get over it. It will take a week, 10 days. You're gonna be itching like crazy. Oh, calamine lotion.
Yeah, calamine lotion is probably not a good idea, but
No, but that's what they did back in the
Yes,
day.
yes.
Smeared it all over us.
Yeah, I was not I did not benefit from the calamine lotion. Nobody offered me any. I was pretty much taken to my room, and first we'd been to the store to get some books and some coloring books and a new pack of crayons. You know what I mean? This is how my mother used to handle illness, right? Okay, let's go out. Let's get you some coloring books, a new pad of paper, and a new box of crayons. Okay, it's sick days. And then, of course, there's the going from bed to couch. But I mean, I don't remember being particularly sick.
Well, it's just like the Brady Bunch episode.
With the measles, yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Where it was a fun day, like you're saying, they were off from school, they were happy. And yeah, so, but I'm seeing that also with COVID. I don't know if you heard me before. I don't know if I got cut off. I'm finding also with COVID that many people that contact me for treatment, they're contacting me because they're terrified that it's going to take a turn for the worse and they won't feel well. But I'm finding that most people, not most, but many, not all, don't even need treatment, that their immune system is fine. They can get over it. They need a good few days, a week, whatever, to get over it. And they're fine.
Yes, whenever we have the opportunity, it's best to let people's immune systems take over and just do the job that needs to be done.
Right.
But we have backup with medicines if necessary. And then depending on the severity of disease, we might want to preemptively treat some things. Like, if let's say if, something like diphtheria, we might want to take care of that first. But with some other things, yeah. But I remember somebody having a patient like 10 years ago that had a terrible, terrible case of chickenpox. It was a developmentally disabled person who had gotten chickenpox in a little bit of a later age, and he was very, very, very sick. And he definitely needed treatment. And I think that he had antimonium tartaric. I'm pretty sure, if I remember the case correctly. So yes, sometimes we need to treat things. And with this Omicron variant, most people are not getting that sick. Most people who that I know of, are kind of like going down with fever and a bit of an ailment, and then just kind of like coming back up slowly. But then again, it depends on their age and such and all that. Okay, so Bönninghausen makes it clear here that when there is disease in the house, when there is a disease to be concerned about, that we can usually give the same remedy that we have treated the patient with, and then give it to the rest of the family, and that will protect the rest of the family usually. That sometimes.
But that's in the case of a known pandemic, meaning we know that we're in a pandemic right now, or an epidemic. What about just, the family whose son comes home with the flu, or the flu? Are you going to prophylactically give that remedy of whatever would you give to everyone in the family?
That's what he's saying is one of the options. But, since flu isn't one of those, it's one of those variable diseases, just kind of like how corona is. People need different remedies, even in the same house, people will need a different remedy. It doesn't have that fixed character that, a lot of the epidemic diseases
It
carry.
doesn't have what character?
A fixed character. Like how the presentation of chicken pox is like basically the same for everybody,
Right.
more or
okay.
less.
Mhm.
Corona's not necessarily the same fixed character because after that first week, with Alpha and Delta, after that first week, once the person started to get better, that was kind of like the danger zone. Are they going to feel better, then go down again, or are they going to feel better and keep feeling better? But hopefully we'll be.
Sorry, can I just ask something because I got confused?
Yes, please.
No, because you just said that sometimes within the same household we'll be
Mhm.
needing different remedies, but I thought Bönninghausen had just said that often we can treat the other person in the same household, even if they have very poor symptoms, based on the remedy that the person they're living with has.
Yes. Right. Yes, exactly that. Yes. And it is
Okay.
right. It is true. This is true. I'm just talking specifically with corona, that
Oh,
corona
okay,
is
okay,
like
okay.
somehow, it's corona is kind of like, it's a different kind of disease than the usual kind of flu type ailment, as whatever happened in that laboratory, right, guys?
Yeah.
Somehow it makes it a little stranger to treat than the ordinary flu. But even in a house, some people will need a different remedy for a flu, but he's not talking about flu per se. He's talking about diseases that can snatch people and take them to their graves, right? Most people
But
get the
Tikva,
flu.
I thought I understood that, and maybe I think he's talking about prophylactically, meaning
Yes,
not a treatment of other people in the house who are sick, but one person is sick, and then to avoid the others getting sick, treating prophylactically with the first remedy, the rest of the household.
exactly. That's exactly what he's saying can be done. That's what
So,
he considers homeoprophylaxis.
so if once others in the family are contracting the disease, then you would treat individually.
Yeah, but you can use this here. Like, okay, let's say somebody gets exposed to scarlet fever. If somebody gets exposed to scarlet fever, the known prophylaxis for scarlet fever, which is a rather fixed disease, is belladonna. So you just give belladonna to the people who were exposed, and they almost never come down with
So can I ask a
disease.
question?
Yes, please.
How often do we see scarlet fever? I've never seen it.
It happens occasionally. It's not that common.
Wait, I
what-
just had one. I just had one. Remember, Tikva? I had one a few months ago. Do you remember? It was a little girl, and I gave her belladonna,
Mhm.
and I wrote it on Facebook, and someone commented, "Oh, I thought we don't see scarlet fever these days."
Yeah,
Right.
we do.
And you
we do. Mhm.
So Tikva, my niece had scarlet fever in 2018. There was a breakout in London, and she came to visit us in South Africa for my daughter's bat mitzvah, and she came with scarlet fever.
Yeah, scarlet
Mhm.
fever happens. So, what you want to do with scarlet fever is you want to give belladonna as a prophylaxis. My kids were exposed to scarlet fever, and from one of our neighbors a long time ago, probably 20, at least 20 years ago. And
So-
I just gave them each a dose of belladonna, even though they'd been playing with a child that had scarlet fever the whole day. They didn't come down with it.
Tikva, I wanted to ask you a question. How does homeopathic prophylaxis fit into the principles of homeopathy? If you if you considering principle of life is life.
I didn't hear the end of your sentence.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I didn't hear the end of your sentence.
So I just on your point of view, looking at homeopathic prophylactic treatment, how would that fall into the principles of homeopathy of like cures life?
Okay.
Like curves.
Yeah, like
cures
here's like. Okay, so the whole theory, okay, there's a different, nowadays people are doing an entirely different type of homeoprophylaxis. And that is totally outside the scope of what Bönninghausen is talking to us today. Giving people, meningitis, no-sode in order to prevent meningitis during one's lifetime and calling that prophylaxis. It does not really fit into homeopathy of like cures like. When we have the example here where Bönninghausen has the family that has infectious typhoid fever, and he treats one person in the house and then gives the same remedy to everybody else that's been exposed, that will generally prevent symptoms developing in the people who have been exposed, because the medicine is in the person already. As the disease starts to take off, it can't really get anywhere because the remedy's there. So it's like just placing the cure. Happens, after exposure, during exposure. This is not something that you can do and then wait 10 weeks or 6 months or 4 years and say, oh, well, you've had prophylaxis. This is talking about there being an acute situation in a town, in a home, in a neighborhood. And they say that the reason why this works is because the same source that I need like a batch of Legos for explaining these things, and I really need to do that sometime. Okay, so you have the source, and everybody has gone like ants to the same source. For example, cholera will come from one river where people are getting their water. Cholera will come from one water pump where people are getting their water. So you have everybody going like bees to the source. And so they're going to all get the disease from the same source and then take it home. So it should have similar symptoms. And this is what people are always trying to do when they're looking for a prophylaxis for a disease in a locality. Prophylaxis is always related to locality. It can't really be applied to like a worldwide phenomena very easily, but it's a localized problem. So if everybody in the house has gotten exposed by this person, then whatever medicine we give to this person, usually since they're infecting the other people, infecting these people, it usually can be warded off by the same remedy. Or if it's a known fixed disease, for example, scarlet fever, belladonna is usually the treatment and the prophylaxis. That makes sense?
I think so.
Now, we could definitely go over this more, in the group, if anybody's interested. But the same remedy that is given to one sick person, since they're getting the same sickness from the same source, will oftentimes cure because it is already in the body of the person. Because let's say that the remedy has a duration. We have to look at the duration of remedies when we're doing this as well. Let's say that we have, we're giving somebody a remedy that has a duration of 1 week. And if the sickness is still going around past 1 week, we might need to redose the remedy in order to prevent them getting infected. It's a little bit complicated, and it's better done with paper and pen, I think. But if there's the same source from the same area, the same person, You can usually give the same remedy and it'll work, but not 100% of the time. But it's worth it to try in a serious disease. And with a non-serious disease, we don't need to treat everything just because a treatment exists. Doesn't mean that people should be treated for absolutely everything that comes along their way, because it's good for the, for the vital force to be able to work on its own. But of course, we are here to give treatment when needed. So, Devera, how do you handle people who you don't think they need treatment? What do you do? What do you give them?
So I don't give them anything. I don't give them Saclac, if that's what you're asking.
No, do you give them reassurance? What do you do?
I do, chicken soup, rest, fresh air, basically that rest as much as you need to, because when the body rests, that's when all the healing takes place.
Mhm.
And that's it. And I tell them, if by chance, if God forbid you feel worse, then feel free to contact me and then I can help you. But right now, from what I'm seeing, you're doing fine and your body can overcome it.
Exactly that. Yeah, and we want to make sure that people know that even if they're sick, they really might want to go outside and get some sun and some fresh air. Which has been
Although I could say when I had COVID, I tried to go outside and I like the sun. I could not be outside whatsoever in the sun. So it depends. Again, it's individualistic. So
Yes, of course. Yes, but giving people just basic tools to cope with their illness and, just basic nursing. Make sure that somebody's bringing healthy food. Yes.
Not so sure that the sun is always best for a person who's sick, but just getting fresh air
Right.
makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Who is it? Margaret Tyler. She tells about how important it is to always, to air out the rooms of sick people. And she said that she learned this in the London Homeopathic Hospital, that in the ward where the nurse came in every single morning and opened all the windows and put in fresh air, the people recovered faster. And so she was a strong proponent of airing out of rooms.
yes, I do that too. And I also add, I like to tell people to take an onion, cut it in half, put it in a bowl and place it on the floor or a table next to their bed. And while they're sleeping, to have that onion exposed overnight. And apparently the onion absorbs the germs. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yes, because there is a halakha that you cannot eat an onion or garlic that has been peeled and cut and left overnight.
Correct.
Yes, so of course.
Have any of you heard putting a cut onion on your feet at night while you sleep?
I've heard of it, but I've never tried it.
Yeah.
On the feet?
Yeah. Underneath the feet, cut onion. I mean, I've never done it. I've heard it from some of my patients.
No, but I did hear about putting in, and I got this from Tikva, from something that one of the books that she sent is to rub an onion on a person who's losing hair, someone who's balding and has alopecia, to rub an onion.
Yeah, I have a quote up from that book today on my WhatsApp status about drinking water during meals. That's such a fun book. Yes, and that book was mentioned here in this essay. And that's why I found that book for us to enjoy online, because that is the Scola Salernitana and the hygiene from the Medical School of Salerno, Italy. And yeah, we have that book in the group and it's fun. It's full of all kinds of interesting tidbits of information. So Devera, we have to try that onion on somebody.
Yes, definitely. I have someone.
Okay, good. Try it. Okay. So, yeah, so homeoprophylaxis, this is very much different than the homeoprophylaxis which is offered today, which is giving no sods. But here, Bönninghausen is offering the assistance that the same medicine given to the sick person in the house should protect the other people in the family when there is a serious disease. Okay? And now we have gone almost to an hour. I think probably we could make this a shorter video for people to watch. What say you? Anybody have an opinion here?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Okay, guys, thank you for joining us here. I'm going to stop the recording.